The climate crisis is a really serious issue to me. It's something I have decided to dedicate my whole life to. We are on the shores of Loch Lomond about to attempt the first ever complete circumnavigation of the whole of mainland Britain in an electric powered paramotor. That's a 3,000-mile journey, and we're trying to rally not only awareness of how climate change is impacting us in the UK, but also try and rally mass public interest in all the solutions that we've got. I am known as the human swan for flying from the Russian Arctic to the UK, following swans, trying to figure out why so many were dying en route. And you couldn't help but notice there the impacts of climate change. We have to find green solutions and start making positive change now. And so this expedition is an ideal opportunity to highlight all the climate heroes around the country that we're going to stop and land and speak to. And we hope that their stories will also inspire a load of other people to make positive change too.
It's the man.
It's good up here.
Dan the
I
man.
wish the wind was going. I wish it was coming from over there, because then we could run that way. And
Sacha had previously flown with a petrol paramotor, and she decided to test out an electric paramotor to really challenge the way she travels in the air, but also to test the capabilities of electric travel.
Getting ready for this expedition meant a total rethink of how Sacha prepared to fly, both physically and mentally. But we need to push new technology if we're going to reach our target for net zero carbon.
Yeah, I'm not worried about the weather. It's more worried about how it's going to work.
Are you worried about her?
Yeah, I'm worried about her. Yeah. We've done all the dry tests, and we had lots of problems. The engines weren't coming up to speed. This is the first flight we're doing now, so I'm slightly apprehensive about this technology, the battery, but I think it's going to work.
It was the first time that the electric paramotor had been tested on long distance journeys like this, and really the first time that Sacha had gotten to fly it was as we took off on the expedition.
It's basically now or never. That's it, power, power, power. Hands up, hands up, hands up. Keep running, good, well done. Woohoo!
We are finally off.
And so off we went. Sacha and Dan flew off from Loch Lomond, and the expedition had finally started. As the team travelled around the country interviewing climate heroes, we also stopped along the way to meet and talk to as many members of the public as possible.
Again, lots of farmers waving all the way, which was fantastic.
In person, on the street, and in the case of the many farmers we met, in their field.
We landed in that field over there, not realising it was connected to the field next to it by a small gap in the wall, which has quite a lot of cattle in it. We were a bit frisky. So I've had to take wing paramotor over the wall, set up over here, hurdling stone walls and double electric fence. I didn't get electrocuted on the bum though. How was that?
Not very nice.
Bigger muscle, bigger
Yeah.
muscle, must hurt more.
It was quite a gentle shock. I don't know if I just brushed it.
Individual action only means anything when you're able to inspire other people around you and you have a community of individual actions, and then they're listened to by those in power and change makers.
Through the work of Conservation Without Borders, we're hoping to make this a narrative that is really positive, solution-focused way of tackling climate change.
It was a mad, bold adventure, but we need to unify everyone if we're going to tackle the climate crisis. And this is a cause particularly close to Sacha's heart.
Nothing can be more personal than having your family home completely incinerated in a bushfire on a scale bigger than anyone predicted, that moved faster than anyone predicted. I had spent the whole night, all through the night in the UK, calling my mum because she doesn't use Facebook, and that was where all the updates were coming. And so I was on the phone to her saying, "Mum, it's closer than you think." One person had seen the fire come over the back of the hill of our place and had told us it was on a scale that was huge. It looked like lava coming over the back of the hill. There was not a chance that your house didn't burn down. It wasn't till a few days later that we realised just how much we had lost. Pretty much everything, all my possessions from before 30, all those memories I'd gathered from before then.
Gone.
All that remained were a few sheets of tin and a chimney. I was just relieved that Mum was okay, but seeing the effects that climate change has had on my mum and countless other people around the world make this something that I just can't ignore.
On the trip, we visited some really interesting rewilding projects where people were restoring habitats, reintroducing species and giving space back to nature. But rewilding doesn't have to mean losing space. And so when we were in South Wales, we visited Paramotor, a sea farm who were harvesting oysters, scallops, mussels, seaweed and kelp, and who were able to show us that food production can continue alongside ecosystem restoration.
So Francois, what exactly is sea farming? And how specifically can these sea farms help us with the climate crisis?
So sea farming, or ocean farming as we like to call it, simply put, it's one's waste is another's food. It's using what nature's been doing for millennia. What is actually happening is there's a huge underwater garden underneath these buoys. Seaweed specifically, because it grows so fast, can absorb phosphorus and nitrates, which are two chemicals that find their way into our oceans via agricultural runoff. It also absorbs carbon dioxide in vast quantities. An acre of kelp would be able to sequester 20 times as much as an acre of forest on the land.
Producing ecosystems, not monoculture. It's all totally logical. But because of our legislation and our conservation mindedness, it's very, very slow to get it going. And yet there's so much compelling logic to farming seaweed and shellfish.
And in particular to farming them together.
Absolutely. Yeah, zero input food. I mean, it's just, yeah, it's too good to be true, really. But it is, and we got all the natural resources. So yeah, just pull our finger out and do it. Yeah.
And you're also offering a blueprint to people on how to make it commercially viable.
It is, yeah. We're only here once, so make the most of it, and do something worthwhile.
It is predicted by 2030 the seaweed industry could be a multi-billion euro industry, and just creating an entire new industry, creating green jobs. Some of the more innovative ways that we are looking into are bioplastics. With the recent sort of pioneer share offer that we've had a really interesting company invest in us, and we've partnered up. They're called Nopla, and they create biodegradable boxes with seaweed liner. And interestingly enough, we've got sugar kelp in here, and that is what's actually been used to create the liner that's within this box itself. So when we say fully biodegradable, this doesn't have to go to a special plant where the liner needs to be removed like normal cases would be. This is just fully biodegradable as it is, and made from seaweed.
Places like Carrymore really show that the solutions to climate change are there, and that we really need investment in the green sector to continue driving innovation, rebuilding ecosystems and creating jobs. Sam at Glanlyn Farm, she's a wonderful example of personal endeavour. Farmers are often on the front line of climate change, particularly somewhere like the UK. So they see the floods, they see the drop in soil quality, and that directly impacts their living. And so sometimes we can think farmers aren't doing enough. They're spraying pesticides, they're ploughing down woodlands and turning it into something that is not sustainable but will give them short gain. But farmers are often the ones that are putting themselves at personal risk and personal expense to make what they're doing more sustainable.
What's been going on here has made climate change seem very real.
You know, we've gone from 7 floods in 40 years, and now we've been here, it's been like 4 major floods in 2 years. In winter, it will be like half full, so this shingle bank will be visible, just the top of it.
Yeah.
It goes from there to the door in 6 hours, to up to waist height at the door in 6 hours.
Wow. What is your big plan for coping with the impacts of climate change along this stretch of river?
So we've got a field the other side of the river which we can't get to in winter because of the depth of the river, and it's 24 acres with a shingle bank, so it's between 24 and 27 acres, so it's our biggest field. It's serious for such a little farm, and I want to turn it into a flood basin over winter. So it would mean digging away part of the riverbank so that when the floodwaters reach a certain height, the water then spills into this field.
Yeah.
And it would be creating a basin by digging the topsoil away and removing some of the subsoil to make the field lower, putting the topsoil back on so that we can get the regeneration of species-rich pasture.
That's where the organic matter is in that topsoil.
Yeah, I want to hold the water back. It'll help my immediate community. There's like 9 houses around here. And then I want to create a wet woodland in one end of it, because that will help slow the flow, leaving this basin. And also wet woodland is one of the lesser biodiverse habitats that we have left in Wales as well. None of us can see how it wouldn't benefit the town downriver from us, but I'm struggling to find anyone to help us with funding.
You have put up your hand and said you're willing to be part of the solution. So your contribution is prepared to be quite a big piece of land which can be farmable, which will create more habitat. It will slow the flow of water here. It will limit the potential for flooding of local houses, but also houses downstream. So far, although word from government is that we want to be encouraging projects like this because it's looking at the big picture, it's collaboration, but the system isn't funding those kind of things.
Yeah, we've got to work with it, but you can't push it to the edges and hope it's going to behave and forgive us. Embrace it, work with it, work side by side. So if it needs a 24, 27 acre field, then yeah, I'm all for it.
We met countless individuals and communities who are taking the initiative to reverse the impact of our consumption on the planet. And it really felt that there's this growing green revolution happening across the country. But they need support and funding. And we need action and legislation to be made quicker. And in fact, the way that Sacha was travelling gave her a pretty unique perspective on the damage being done to our landscapes. Damage which we often take for granted or think of as normal.
Locals had mentioned this stain on the landscape from the industrial past, which exists in the form of an acid tar pit. That's where old oil and other waste from industry have actually been dumped in old quarries. This is beyond doubt disgusting, and it's quite shocking to think that things like this exist. But there are natural solutions. Why aren't we just getting on with it? That's got to be the theme of the next 10 years up until 2030, where there's a problem and we can work with nature to solve it. Let's just go out and do it. Stop talking about it, stop hiding away, stop pretending it doesn't exist. Just get on and do it, because we know that we can fix things like this.
When we crossed the border into Scotland, everyone was at an all-time high. We were all so excited to be nearly finishing the trip that we'd set out on so long ago. We'd all learned so much about climate change when it got to this point, and were excited to see what more we could learn. We made our grand entrance flying past the Kelpies and then landed at Celtic Renewables. We were so keen to talk to them because they really bring the circular economy to light.
Martin, can you explain the challenge that you have taken on here?
We're a biological industry, biotechnology. We use a fermentation process, not unlike what you would use to make beer or wine or whiskey. But the raw materials that we're using for our process are the residues that are used actually in the whiskey industry. So less than 10% of what goes in to make whiskey ends up as a whiskey in a bottle. And we can take that other 90% of raw material, which has no value, and in here we can convert it into something that's of high value, and they're chemicals that we can use in our everyday life, but they're made from sustainable biological resources: acetone, butanol and ethanol. We also make a solid material which can be used as a high-grade animal feed. All of these we use every single day of our lives. You don't use them necessarily on their own, but they're behind pharmaceuticals, healthcare products, hygiene. They're ubiquitous. You just don't see them, and we need them. We're making the same chemicals as you can make from oil, right here, sustainably, biologically. And I didn't invent the process. It's 100 years old, you know?
So is it normal in the food and drink industries that a lot of the raw materials that go in don't actually become food, become a waste stream or a byproduct of some kind?
That's true of any industry. If you have a primary product that's the focus of your sales and your marketing, then you're going to use a lot of stuff to make that, and it's going to be left over. And what I'm looking at is taking the non-valuable stuff and seeing, can we squeeze a little bit more value out of it before we discard it? Or in our case, we can take raw materials and pretty much convert all of it into higher value. And I believe it's the future for the country to grow a stable bioeconomy based on a circular economy, sustainability, reusing things and getting more value out of them.
You have a brilliant idea here. It makes economic sense and it makes biological climate sense. Was it an easy thing to get funded, considering how much rhetoric there is out there around the fact that we need to get to net zero?
I'd love to say yes, no is the honest answer. This started off at Napier University as a research project, and it's now this behind us. It's a very long way from a test tube in a lab, and it takes a lot to get from there to here. We need to do it faster, and we need to do it cheaper. And that's what COP needs to do. The governments are there to enable people like me and people with much better ideas and better people than me to bring their ideas to fruition. Governments can enable it, the inventors will do it.
After seeing what can be done with whisky waste, we were even more excited to be heading into Whisky Country. Sacha and Dan were really excited about flying this section, but just as we headed north, we had a serious problem.
Actually gives more back to the soil and reduces our carbon footprint.
Sacha was mid-flight recording a video for Instagram Live when there was a fire.
Well, you might have noticed that in the middle of filming that last vlog, I had a complete motor failure. That's not a good sign for the motor. Just hope this doesn't mean the end of the expedition.
Get ready for it. A lot of tutting and awing and
When Sacha's paramotor broke, we didn't know whether she would have to delay her expedition and stay where she was, or whether she'd have to pause everything.
It's all very blacky melted.
Oh yeah, there is a problem.
However, the beauty of the expedition had turned into these stories, the short, sheer quantities of different people that are doing things to try and counteract the climate crisis across the country. So the most important thing was Sacha continuing on that journey and getting as many stories as she could, whether or not she was flying. So we decided to continue the expedition, driving in the electric vehicles up towards Orkney. Orkney is seen as a global test centre for marine energy. And the move from fossil fuels to renewables is really important if we ever want to finish our carbon emissions, but the struggle we're having is that that's quite a difficult process and we need new technology in order for that to happen. And the Round Britain Climate Challenge showed us that we're just not there yet, but there are so many people looking into new technology and new ways that we can innovate and that we can reach those targets. And really they just need funding, and we need leaders at COP26 to recognise that and to invest in the cleaner future of renewable energy.
Behind me, just over to my right shoulder, you can see one of the many oil rigs here in Cromarty Firth that is being decommissioned. For many of the locals, obviously, it's a bit of an eyesore, but I personally see it as a bit of an inspiration and a sign that we are moving away from fossil fuels. Hope we can do it fast enough. We've got to wonder. We have made massive changes to the whole planet due to use of fossil fuels. Now, we can be ashamed of that because we are in a position of climate change, or we can use it as a bit of inspiration and say to ourselves, well, we could change the world using our big brains and collaboration, and we could change the world that quickly. Surely we can do it again. And now we've got better communications, better technology. We can surely do it even faster this time. So yeah, I'm choosing to see it as an inspiration.
On their journey, the team passed so many visible signs of Britain's transition to renewable energy and carbon-neutral energy sources. On and offshore wind farms, geothermal sites, nuclear plants, and generators that were using wood pellets instead of coal. One of Sacha's key objectives for the expedition was to test long-distance electric travel, and her experience with the electric paramotor reflects the wider challenge we all face in moving from fossil fuels to renewable energy and developing the technology to do so.
Sacha's journey with the electric paramotor has shown that we still have quite a way to come when it comes to electric travel, but that's okay. I think instead of saying that we're not there yet and we have to give up, we've basically shown that we have come really far when it comes to electric travel, and we just need to take a couple more steps to make it worthwhile.
I think that this expedition has really shown that there's so many people in so many different walks of life working on solutions to climate change in small ways, in really much bigger ways. You've got things from a farmer making more sustainable farming practice choices, got communities that are working on engaging people with the crisis, and you've got really big companies that are making fundamental changes to the way that they manufacture in order to reach this net zero target that we all have.
So Sacha's big question about this expedition was, Britain started the Industrial Revolution, can we start the Green Revolution? And I think what we've discovered on the expedition is that there are loads of initiatives and individuals, communities, companies, big and small, making big changes, and that you're not alone, you're not trying to do something impossible, it's not an overwhelming task. There is actually a green community out there, and together with that strength, we can really do this. And I think Sacha, by meeting all those stops and those communities and those heroes, has really proved that. The Green Revolution is here and it's already started, and Britain is at the forefront of it.